So today's webinar. So you're here today to see the webinar entitled Irish Specimen Fish, What's the Story? And that webinar today is going to be given by our Dr. William Roche. Willie is a Senior Research Officer with Inland Fisheries Ireland and works mainly on the marine sports fish currently, but has worked on most freshwater species over his career. He is Secretary of the Irish Specimen Fish Committee and is a keen angler in his spare time. So Willie, I'd invite you just to share your video and to come off mute for a few seconds and maybe introduce yourself and if you've a few words to say.
Thanks, Sarah. Delighted to be here today and thanks for the invitation. So I'm working with the Specimen Fish Committee for numerous years, and it's nice to be invited and to share some of our ideas about specimens and also to maybe help people who might be new to the whole specimen fish game. And maybe I'll let the video and the presentation take care of itself. I'm very happy to take questions, any questions you might have afterwards. So over to you, Sarah, and let's roll with the show.
Thank you, Willie.
Hello and welcome to the presentation. Hello and welcome to the presentation today. My name is Willie Roche. I'm Secretary of the Irish Specimen Fish Committee, but in my day job, I'm a Senior Fisheries Biologist with Inland Fisheries Ireland. Now, many years ago, I joined IFI to work on all sorts of fish species, and I had never heard of the Irish Specimen Fish Committee, possibly like many of you. Within a week, as a very keen angler, I understood fully and was fascinated by it all. And then about 20 years ago, I was given the opportunity to work on the committee. I was invited on as secretary, and I've enjoyed doing this work ever since that. But you didn't come along here today to listen to my story, and I hope over the next 20 minutes or so we'll be able to bring you through what the Specimen Fish Committee means and what it's all about. Today, my name is Willie Roche. So you've caught a big one. A big fish in one of many Ireland's fine waterways or marine sites. So what's next? Well, if you catch a big one on rod and line in Ireland, you might be able to claim a Specimen Fish Award. You might ask, how will I know that? Well, we'll explain as we go on. Big fish of many different species can be caught in Ireland. And any time you go fishing, you could be lucky enough to catch one. It could be a specimen. And this is the purpose of the exercise today, to kind of talk about that and get to understand that, or even a new record. Fish on the right in this photograph is a triggerfish, and it would have been taken off the coast of County Clare. These exotic species, some of these exotic species are available in Irish waters, and all it takes is a little bit of know-how to be there at the right time in the right place. And that's one of the reasons that the Specimen Fish Committee annual report is eagerly awaited, because it provides information on the distribution of these types of species and all of the other species. So it collects a lot of data. It presents angling information for anglers and for anyone else that might be interested in where these fish occur and when. And it also can be used as a tourism promotional tool and for lots of other functions as well. So the basics. What is a specimen fish? Well, it's defined really as a fish of unusually large size for its species. And in Irish waters, fish come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And for the specimen fish purposes, it's a fish above a set minimum weight or length that will be taken by the angler using fair angling means. That means basically on rod and line. And the fish will be landed by the angler, and it'll be processed, if you like, on the shore in terms of data capture, be it weighing or measurement by a group, and photographs taken, and then it can be submitted by claim. So the Irish Specimen Fish Committee publishes a list of species every year, and that has all the threshold weights and threshold lengths which would qualify a species for specimen category. And details of the records are also there. So if you've got a really big one and you think it's a record, you can check it against the list. For specimen purposes, then the fish must be properly identified. We have to be sure it's as stated. And good photographs will help in that. And it must be measured properly on a measuring mat or weighed on the certified scales, and the weighing must be done on land. And weighing on land is important because it's impossible to weigh a fish on board. So among the examples of nice specimens we have, one of the species we see a lot of is a flounder, and this is a lovely flounder taken from the east coast. And then on the right hand side is a Roche hybrid coming from the Cork area. And these are kind of typical of the high quality fish that can be taken in different settings in the marine and freshwater respectively. More specimens, a lovely river pike, and on the bottom left we have a Ballan wrasse, which is taken by well-known specimen hunter Evan McGovern. Then a nice carp on the top right from the loch in Cork, a famous venue for carp, which hasn't fished for the last couple of years due to a disease problem in the lake, but hopefully it'll come back soon. And finally, on the bottom right, a gilt head bream from the Cork area. And again, this is an example of one of these kind of interesting exotic species, which up to relatively recently would have been more common to see it in Mediterranean climes, but we're seeing good numbers of high quality fish now off the Irish coast in specific areas. And again, it's an example of how anglers are collecting information on the presence of some of these more interesting species through different methods, one of which would be recording of specimens, but also through reporting some interesting information by way of angling returns to inland Fisheries Ireland. More happy punters, and the fish on the measuring mat is a stingray from the Kerry area, and plenty of smiling faces around that and the pike on the top right hand side, and a lovely river trout then from I think it's from the Tipperary area, taken a couple of years ago. But these are all good examples of good quality photographs taken by anglers or their fishing buddies in the wake of a big capture, and all fish would have been returned alive. This is what it's all about. Smiling angler holding on to his fish, having enjoyed a great catch. So this is David Tully, caught his lovely Roche Bream hybrid in 2015 and was presented for his trouble to recognise his excellent achievement with a specimen certificate, a badge, and details of his fish then were published in the annual report. Apart from logging specimens, which is the main bulk of the work undertaken by the ISFC, it's also the port of call if one wants to record a record fish. In this instance, this is an interesting story of a record lake, the record lake brown trout, standing at 26 pounds 2 ounces. And this record has been extant since 1894, taken by William Mears from Mullingar and reported here by Peter Carvasso from the Evening Herald in the 1994 report from the ISFC. The full story is there, and how long it took to land, the method that was used, and the part of the lake in which the fish was taken. And this exceptional fish is unlikely to be bettered, because fish maybe of this size may not be recorded in any lake in the future. But one angler gave it a good shot. In 2012, Welsh angler Seri Jones planned a trip on Loch Corrib to catch a very big brown trout, and had a fish of just under 24 pounds caught on a Saturday, as you can see. And it's a bit shy of the record, but it's certainly a good shot, and it certainly threatened the record at the time. Again, one of the interesting aspects of this whole sort of specimen fish activity, and something that while one can aim to get a specimen, the capture of a record is maybe the ultimate goal for those that might specialize in capturing specimen fish. But it's equally likely that if you travel with someone that knows or fish with someone that's well accustomed to different techniques, that you could catch the big one and land a big record. Say the record brown trout is unlikely to be beaten, but some of the maybe the more commonly caught species now, it could be you. You could be the individual that will catch that Irish record. The largest record fish was bluefin tuna, taken by tuna expert Adrian Malloy in Donegal Bay in 2001, and this fish weighed a massive 440 kilos and is an important record in that it establishes what Irish tuna can run to. And this fishery is now operating in a catch and release mode, and fish of this size haven't been observed since that time. So it's an important record to have on our record books, and it shows the size of the fish and the feat achieved by Adrian at the time. So earlier I mentioned the Specimen Fish Report. This is the cover of the 2020 report, which is just published. It'll be on the website, if not on the website already, www.specimenfish.ie, and hard copy will be available soon for those that like to have hard copy in their hands. And despite COVID, we had over 300 specimen fish ratified in 2020 and one new record. And the scene below is from a Dutch trade fair a number of years ago, in which Dutch anglers were presented with their specimen certificates. So they were happy to come along to a gathering in Rotterdam and get presented. And that's another example of how the Specimen Fish Committee works across borders, if you like, working with different people in different countries. And the scheme is open to anybody. It doesn't matter from what country you came, as long as the fish was caught in Irish waters. As with any scheme, one needs some rules. So the Specimen Fish Committee rules are relatively simple. You must use an official claim form, and that's available on the website. Then your decision might be whether you're claiming a length or a weight-based specimen. Many species now are available as length-based species, and the lengths are published in a table at the back of the report or on the claim form. And the traditional way is by weight. And that would have been the long-standing way. That the length option has only been introduced relatively recently, and it reflects a move in the fisheries arena to length-based reporting, and is a more conservation-orientated approach. All record fish must be weighed, because length isn't a good measure of record status. One can have a long, thin fish and a short, fat fish, but a weight will reflect the actual status of the fish in terms of its overall conformation, if you like. And I'm emphasizing this as well. You can't weigh a fish on board. It's just too inaccurate, and it won't provide the correct detail, which is what we require at specimen fish level. You can weigh a fish on your own personal scales, and this is to help with the conservation objective of getting fish back into the water on site, and is obviously much more convenient. But there are requirements that the scales must be certified annually and certified independently, because scales can lose some of their precision, and if certified, we can be satisfied that it's meeting the required standard to weigh the right fish. And that's important because one might be weighing a record fish, and we need to capture that properly. And the key point is that the scale size must be appropriate to the size of the fish. Small fish can't be weighed on a large capacity scales. It's just not reflecting accurately enough the actual size of the fish, and it's inappropriate in this instance. The alternative is to get the fish weighed in a shop, maybe bring it to the shop where the scales will be independently certified, because it's a trading premises, and they're obliged to have legal standards would apply in terms of the scales and its certification. All fish should be measured. For length-based specimens, we require obviously specific lengths, and the fish must be measured, and the photograph taken of the fish being measured, as you've seen in the video. Also critical is that we see the features of the fish. Some animals have particular features, and these are listed in the ISFC report. So what we need to capture, what we need to see, say in the case of smoothhound, is the mouth and the shape of the fish generally. And that's an important identifying feature. There's a full guide also on the IFI website. It's called the Irish Sport Fishes, a guide to their identification. It's an old guide, but very, very useful line diagrams which identify key features of fish in a very clear manner, and a very useful guide if you're looking to identify the species that you've caught. We've been speaking about fish, which is quite appropriate, and now maybe a little bit of focus on the ISFC It's a voluntary committee which records rod caught, record and specimen fish from waters in Ireland. There's various Irish angling interests on the committee, and it's been in existence since 1955. So that's a very long-term record of captures of these various species over time, and an important record for comparison of trends in different animals, and we'll return to that later. In that time, about 30,000 specimens have been claimed, which is an incredible statistic in itself. And as mentioned already, we're covering species in freshwater and also in the marine environment. The ISFC was established by two individuals that had a great vision for the future. Michael Kennedy, Dr. Michael Kennedy and Dr. Arthur Wendt established the ISFC in 1955 with a view to recording how fast fish grew in Irish waters. Both were biologists. Michael Kennedy worked with the precursor of IFI and was heavily invested in studying the ecology of many marine and freshwater species and had a particular fondness for mullet. Dr. Wendt worked in the department, and he published a lot of data on many different aspects of many different species. But between the two of them, they made a massive contribution to the early pioneering years of fisheries ecology and documenting many of the facts that we know today kind of as being true, but these guys would have been to the fore in documenting these data and these findings. So going back to first steps for the ISFC, prior to it being formed, there was very haphazard recording of large fish, and I suppose the purpose of it was to verify and record notable rod caught fish. It was a very simple goal, and the originators wanted to just establish how fast fish grew in Irish waters and to record that. So while we may have tall tales at times about the fish was this long or that weight, this was a process which would verify and record these notable rod caught fish and document them and form an important record. And this procedure then was set up by the ISFC in the 1950s, and the first report covered the period 1955 to 1956. So for students of the specimen fish business, this is the schedule or the listing of specimens as published in 1956. And this is a list of the species and the specimen weights. So in red there we have identified the freshwater species, and you can see that salmon were listed as at 40 pound specimen. So it's now at 20 pounds. So you can see how much things have changed. Some not so much, but certainly it would have been an early attempt at trying to establish what would be a threshold for specimen weight. No hybrids, which is again a reflection of the lack of maybe understanding of the likelihood of hybridization, and that was certainly ramped up with the arrival of Roche into various fisheries, and their high fecundity tended to introduce this sort of pressure and maybe resulted in the presence of the numerous hybrids in many fisheries, in many Irish fisheries at the present time. There was 41 marine species listed, and there was a good range. You've got to consider there that even in that, red mullet was listed from the outset, garfish, and interesting species like John Dory. So they had a feel for what was in Irish waters. They had a kind of a background knowledge that said, well, we must put these fish on our listings to apply certain threshold weights, and let's see what the response from anglers might be. And that then morphed over time into what we know as the specimen list, which maybe guides some of our better established specimen hunters in terms of identifying species that they might like to target. So where does all this specimen data get us to? Well, early in the presentation I identified that it allows us to celebrate your achievements by marking your So where does all this specimen data get us to? Well, early in the presentation I identified that it allows us to celebrate your achievements by marking your achievements by presenting you with a certificate, a specimen badge, and by having your fish published in the annual report. But what it has meant that over the past 65 years is that we've collected a vast amount of information, long-term data on various species. Certainly some species are more recent arrivals, but the long-term species that would be aware of that we would have been listed initially, we have that again over 60 years of data. So that allows us to look at trends and trends over time and see change which might be reflected in some of these populations. We are collecting information on the distribution of these animals. In other words, in what systems they were recorded and their spread over time, or maybe it reflects increased angling activity in certain areas. So this also allows us to look at information for the best months to capture these fish, and we also have data on baits that the anglers used. So putting all that together, we're working on a specimen fish atlas, which captures these data for all of these species presented per species. So we give an example here of roach, and we have information on the, just get my pointer here, on the numbers of specimens over time, the specimen weight, the red line, so we can see some sort of a trend there. We're looking back at the 60s here in the Munster Blackwater where roach were tending to dominate. This then, the second panel is the months in which they're caught. So you can see generally towards the middle of summer, August is when the kind of the bulk of the fish would have been caught. And then this is the different weight ranges. And maybe the more interesting feature is to look at the top 10 locations. So the top 10 sites up to 2000 and post 2000. So that gives an idea of the distribution of these species, and gives maybe a clue as to, for a biologist, but also to anglers as to where they might target, and that we can identify certain trends in activity. So this is where these long-term data come into their own. Achievements by presenting. So a key output of the Specimen Fish Atlas, which is being worked on at the moment, it's a big job of work. We have a lot of species, up to maybe in excess of 90 species to be reported at a very detailed level, and there's significant analysis to be done. But we're showing here the distribution of these fish. In other words, the areas that specimens were captured around the island. And in red are the locations where it was captured up to 2000, and then in green is the locations after 2000. So you can see straight away for roach, the big focus and the biggest area is on the Munster Blackwater, which is around Cappoquin, where there was a bacon factory and fish grew very large there, and large numbers were taken by anglers. And then there was locations in the Shannon and in the Boyne and further north in Lough Neagh, and then subsequently in the green spots we've isolated captures of specimens in different waters in the Midlands, and also in the Lee and in the Barrow as well. So roach, specimen roach, although roach are very common, are not widely distributed, and it is a hard specimen to get. But this gives you an idea of the kind of information that we can compile now based on your high quality data, and it gives us the kind of resolution we need to look at patterns and trends in some of the distributions of these amazing fish and really interesting species. But possibly the most interesting aspect of this for lesser spotted dogfish is the distribution of lesser spotted dogfish as specimens around our coastline. So up to 2000 in red, as I've said before, we can see out of the Cork area, off the Cork coast, they're very, very popular for dogfish, and lots of specimens taken up to 2000, and also out of Valencia. But you can see from the map there's a widespread distribution of specimens off the east, south, west and northwest coast. So dogfish again being prominent between 1955 and the year 2000. Subsequently then, the distribution of specimens is much more limited. Off the northeast coast, large numbers taken. That might be due to activity by certain skippers focusing on some of these animals, but also in Cork, out of Cork Harbour, and to a certain extent in Kerry. But the west, it seems that numbers of specimens have declined, and also on the east coast it's the same. So that we're investigating that to see if there's any trend in that in terms of size or change in distributions. And this is what these really valuable angling data can demonstrate for us. So just to remind myself of why we're doing this, to highlight the quality of Irish angling. This is a fine bream taken by Dan Lynch. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. Thanks for listening. This shot, I think, emphasizes what it's all about. This young angler has caught a fine taupe, and he's continued on in this manner over the last number of years, and has built up and caught quite an impressive collection of large fish in Irish waters, and is now a specimen hunter of some renown. So opportunities are there for anybody who wants to give it a go, and it's worthwhile. There's lots of opportunities in some of the really excellent fisheries we have around our coast and in freshwater as well. So I wish you all the best for the Go Fishing Week, and I hope you have tight lines in 2021 and beyond.
Thanks, Willie, for that. That was a really fascinating and interesting talk. And with today's weather, it kind of just made me want to just grab a rod and get out there and see what I can catch. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to my colleagues Lorraine and Aideen, and they've been working hard in the background, collating all the questions that have come in, and they're now going to put those questions to Willie.
Okay, so I have a question here from David Norman. Are all lower caught specimen fish referred to as spin? And if so, could this be updated to reflect changing techniques?
Okay, well, there's several species for which that might apply, but for the most part, we would record whatever the angler has sent in. So if it's spinning, which might be as it's termed, we mightn't get the full detail, and if it's a lure, we would certainly mention that. So yeah, we can pay more attention to that, but generally speaking, we would record whatever we're given by the angler, and some anglers mightn't give us full details. So I'll take the point, and we will include any specific mentions of lures. Absolutely no problem.
Okay, this question comes from Noel Caffrey. Can you tell me why there is no length-based specimen for bream, roach and hybrids? Length-based is much simpler than weight-based, with the problems of having certified scales, and it would hopefully encourage more people to record specimens. Yeah.
No problem there, and I'd agree with Noel. I think we've seen a bit of an upsurge in the numbers of people recording length-based specimens in recent years because exactly the issue that Noel identifies. Just by way of kind of explanation, initially we focused in terms of length-based specimens on boat caught fish, because there was a requirement to bring larger fish ashore, have them weighed, and then release them, particularly species at sea. And this is obviously very challenging for the angler, but particularly challenging for the fish. So we're trying to move away from that, and we focused on those species initially. And the aim is to progress to all species, to make it easier for anglers to claim. I mean, that's I think you can take that as the direction we're going, and we'd like to get all species on length-based status. Again, it works for us, it works for anglers. But just to advise that it takes quite a bit of time to determine the correct length that one might use, because we need to pull data from other sources other than specimen data. Because as you'll see in the report even, that the length is quite variable. So you might get a fish of X number of kilos, but the length will vary depending on the venue it might come from, male or female, time of the year. So in order to get a fair length that reflects the actual weight of the specimen weight, we need to collect a lot of data. There's quite a bit of work on that. It's not just as straightforward as it seems, but it is a project that we're certainly working towards. And we will have everything as length-based in due course. So as quickly as we can, we'll get it up and running for all.
I just had another question here. What is the distribution range for thin-lipped and golden grey mullet?
Well, we've got 3 species in Ireland in terms of specimens. We've got the thick-lipped, the thin-lipped, and the golden grey. And the thick-lipped is very widely distributed, will be recorded around most coastlines of Ireland. The thin-lipped is less so. There's a couple of spots. Southerly generally, Rosscarbery is a good location for them. And also they've been recorded as far north as in the Swords area, and in pockets around the coast. They're also recorded in the Waterford estuary. In a couple of hot spots there, but they're not widely distributed. Also, there might be instances where they're recorded in some areas and mightn't just be recognized because they're quite similar looking to thick-lipped mullet. The golden grey, similar enough. Rosscarbery again is another good location for them, and there are pockets. Again, the distribution tends to be southerly, possibly because it's somewhat warmer there, or the estuaries are more suitable. So one of the functions, I suppose, of the specimen committee is to record the distribution of these species, and we hope that through the atlas we'll be able to demonstrate and show kind of on a broader basis the distribution of all these species. So that'll, I think, be of use to all anglers.
Okay, Willie, another question. You've 2 hats on today, one with the committee and one with IFI. Are you carrying out any joint projects like tagging of the bigger fish to monitor them and their activities? I know there's a taupe tagging project. Don't know if that's with you, or just wondering how many species tagging project IFI have. And I'm also aware of Ken Wheel and salmon work. Okay,
so there's a number of elements to that question. Yeah, I'm responsible for the marine sports fish program within IFI. And one of the programs we run jointly with the business development section is the Marine Sports Fish Tagging Program. And that's focused on elasmobranchs. So taupe and all of the other elasmobranchs are included in that. And that program started in the 1970s. And I go back to the time of Dr. Michael Kennedy. At that time, there would have been a lot of competitions ongoing, and maybe there was poor practices there as regards taking these fish ashore, weighing them, and dumping them, I suppose, and that wasn't good for fish. So in order to, well, they were dead obviously, but in order to monitor them, that program was established in 1970, and it was using conventional tags to tag elasmobranchs, and that's delivered through and that continues to the present day, delivered through the many charter skippers are involved, and some private anglers. So all the species that you can think of in terms of elasmobranchs, there's quite a lot of tagging ongoing, and we've picked up tags from as far afield as the US and off the Azores and the rest. So fantastic range of information, and the most common tag species is blue shark. In other programs then, we are engaged heavily in telemetry studies, which is using electronic tags, and we're tagging, at the moment, we've got 3 sites in operation on the River Boyne, on the Erif, which is the National Salmonid Index catchment, where we're doing a lot of tagging using different types of tags, and also in Lough Curran, where there's been some ongoing investigations into the status of sea trout. So we're looking at the sea trout situation there. So we're tagging juvenile, smolts going to sea at 3 different locations at the moment. We're also involved with another project with partners AFBI in the north, and we've just done some satellite tagging on adult salmon kelts, and that have headed to sea. So we're trying to pick up the tracks that they've taken at sea to see if there's any bottlenecks in terms of their survival, because we need these data to understand where the bottlenecks are and see, can we manage the bottlenecks away by undertaking specific management programs. And then there's other ongoing projects, that like the Diades project, which is working around the Waterford estuary, and actually there we've tagged thin-lipped mullet in the Waterford estuary to look at their movement. They're a fascinating species that can live in freshwater for a period of their life, but they spend, I suppose, maybe the bulk of their life at sea. And we're also undertaking, through anglers, again, we've a lot of work with anglers, because they're obviously an important part of all of these programs. We're working on, we have a national bass program, and we're undertaking fly tagging of bass wherever bass are taken. So we've a number of anglers that have been trained up to fly tag these bass, and we're looking for their movement. So I suppose if I was to summarize and say, yes, we've a lot of tagging ongoing. We're looking at elasmobranchs, salmonids, and bass as well. And we're heavily invested in both conventional tagging using ordinary numbered tags, and then this electronic tagging using different types of tags.
Yes, I have another question there, Willie, just from Noel. It's just asking, is the data you've recorded available to the public? And is in brackets Specimen Fish Atlas ? Or when will it be available? What you previewed looks very, very interesting. So.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Well, obviously the Specimen Fish report is available, and it's going back. There's copies on the website specimenfish.ie. So that's available. The Atlas is one of these projects that we took on, and it's taken longer to deliver than we had anticipated, but it's getting there. And that will be available to the public, absolutely, in due course. We're going to getting the work done first, and then we'd see how it might be released. But we're conscious of the value of it as a document of record, and that it'll appeal both to biologists and to anglers, and maybe to lots of different people that might be interested in the occurrence and the presence of large fish in Irish waters, both freshwater and marine.
Okay, Willie, last question. Why is there no weight or length for some species like ungulates ray?
Well, the ungulate ray is one of those species that's limited in its distribution, generally occurs in Tralee Bay, and some have been taken further west also, further north of Tralee Bay. We took it off the listing because it has a particular status. It's somewhat rare, if you like. We have reintroduced it at a length-based specimen of 80 centimeters about 3 years ago. So while there's no weight-based specimen for ungulate ray at the moment as a conservation measure, so that's to avoid people having to bring them ashore to weigh, we have a length-based specimen, and it's on there for anyone that cares to look at it. Just let me double check that. I hope I'm not telling something untrue there, but memory isn't as it used to be. Ray ungulate, no specimen weight. Yeah, greater than 85 centimeters. The specimen record is 18 pounds. There's no specimen weight at the moment for conservation measure, and then at 85 centimeters or greater, one can record a specimen.